In this episode of Bake Across Europe, we're traveling to England. In the United States, children set out milk and cookies for Santa on Christmas Eve. But in England, they set out mince pies and sherry for Father Christmas. Mince pies actually date back all the way to the Middle Ages, when the recipe used to contain meat, dried fruits, spices. But as the recipe developed throughout the centuries, meat was eventually left out, and what people enjoy today when they say they're making mince pies is just dried fruits, candied fruits, sugar, apples, spices, and alcohol. So in today's episode, I'm going to show you how to make mince pies, and you can set these out for Father Christmas on Christmas Eve. For this recipe, you're going to need a combination of different dried fruits. I used 180 grams of dried currants, 180 grams of raisins, and 50 grams of prunes. You'll also need 115 grams of brown sugar and 180 grams of diced cooking apples such as Granny Smith or Honeycrisp. The next ingredient is grated suet, which might be hard to find if you don't live in the UK. I did find some at my local grocery store after I asked the butcher. If you can't find it, you can substitute grated butter, but make sure the butter is frozen when you grate it. Next is 50 grams of candied orange peel and the juice and zest of half a lemon. For the spices, you'll need a pinch of salt and half a teaspoon each of ground cinnamon, mace, and cloves, and a quarter teaspoon each of ground nutmeg and ginger. This first part of the recipe is extremely simple. You just take all of those ingredients that I just showed you and combine them in a medium to large size bowl. Then you're going to stir the ingredients really well, and then you're going to pour over either brandy or rum or a combination of the two until it just covers your mincemeat. Then you're going to cover this and let it sit overnight. In the morning, you'll give it a stir and either transfer it to a sterilized canning jar or use it directly in your recipe. It is recommended to let this sit for a couple of weeks, preferably 1 month before you decide to bake, but it can be used the next day. For the short crust pastry, you'll need 185 grams of all-purpose flour, 20 grams of powdered sugar, 1 egg yolk, 1 tablespoon water, 100 grams of cold unsalted butter, and for the egg wash, you'll need 1 egg yolk plus 1 tablespoon of milk. You're also going to need a mince pie pan, which is a lot shallower than an American muffin pan. I will link the one I bought on Amazon below. You will also need a fluted circular cookie cutter that is slightly larger than the diameter of the mince pie molds. I couldn't decide if I was going to use the smaller or the larger one. I'll show you which one fit best for me. You'll also need a star cookie cutter that fits just inside the mold. If you were in an absolute pinch and didn't want to buy a mince pie pan, you could use an American muffin pan, but you'd probably be better off using a mini muffin pan instead of the larger one, just because the larger one is so much deeper than traditional mince pies. I made my short crust pastry in a food processor, but you can do it by hand as well if you don't have one. First, just pulse together the dry ingredients, then pulse in the butter until it resembles wet sand, and then add in the water and egg yolk, and pulse just until it comes together to form a crumbly dough. You'll know it's done when you can press it together with your fingers and it forms a dough. Lay out a piece of plastic wrap and pour the crumbly dough onto it, and then you can use the plastic wrap to squeeze all of it together to form a cohesive, smooth dough. You're going to form this into a disc covered in plastic wrap and store in the refrigerator for 30 minutes before rolling out. Roll out the chilled dough on a lightly floured surface or between two pieces of parchment paper. And then you're going to cut out the circles for your mince pies. This is what the smaller circle cutout looks like. It sits slightly below the top of the mince pie mold. The larger circle cutout seemed to be the best fit since it sat slightly above the pie mold. So then go ahead and cut out your circle cutouts to fit into each of the pie molds, and then you're going to roll out any scrap dough that you have and cut out the stars to fit on top of each pie. Then put a scoop of mincemeat into each of the pie shells. I used a mini melon baller, but you'll see that mine actually overflowed a little bit in the oven, so maybe use something slightly smaller than that to fill each of the pies. Then gently press on the stars. Finally, whisk together the egg yolk and tablespoon of milk and then using a pastry brush, brush these onto the top of the stars. Then bake for 20 to 25 minutes in a 350-degree Fahrenheit or 180-degree Celsius preheated oven until they are bubbling and golden brown. Let sit in the pan for about 10 minutes so that they don't fall apart when you remove them. Then let them cool on a rack and enjoy at room temperature. Well, there you go. I hope you enjoyed the recipe. Mince pies are really like a little bite of Christmas. They have all the flavors that we associate with Christmas. The spices, the dried fruit, expensive alcohols. It's all there in one little tiny bite. So let me know if you give this recipe a try and what you think of it. As always, let me know if there's any recipes you'd like me to make in future videos. And please like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you next time.